Okay, we are back. And I need to look at we're almost back. There, now I can see who's wanting to come in. All right, so we have Hogarth. And I'm actually going to be spending my time looking at the other person's screen here. So don't worry about the video. All right, so Hogarth is one of your important Baroque artists. And this is one of his more famous works, the Marriage à la Mode. And Hogarth was late Baroque. Some would say he's early neoclassical. And marriage à la mode means marriage after the fashion, the way that it was done at those times. And he would basically draw these sketches, or he would actually make a painting first and then have them engraved. He himself was an engraver.
Good afternoon, America. Steve Bailey here. Happy Halloween to all my...
You guys, keep your stuff quiet. So he would write these series of moral tales where he would portray in like 6 different pictures how someone, started off and went down the road to destruction, or how a person actually pulled themselves out of the gutter and made it to be a good, upstanding citizen. And in this one, it tells the story of this couple who is from a rich family, and they get married to each other and have no interest. And we are going to go through and sort of dissect this one series he did, although he actually did several of them. And so in this is actually the second picture. You have the newly married couple, and all through the picture, and I will point out a few of these things, everything in this has some sort of symbolism. So from here to these what these figures are, okay, these guys. So let's move on to the first scene from Marriage à la Mode. So this is called the marriage settlement, or the marriage contract. And what he did is he would paint this and then have it engraved, and then they could print out many, many, many copies. And basically he would make his money off the sales of these copies. And so this is the painting, this is the engraving, and you'll notice that they're backwards. Since Hogarth himself was an engraver, he knew that it would come out, so he actually painted the paintings backwards, so that when they were engraved, they came out the way that he intended them to be. So I'm going to just sort of read through and point out a few of the things that are in this. And each of the pictures is full of little details. We won't have time to go through all of them, but here we have, this is the new couple. Here's the groom, here's the bride. Here is the earl. So this is the groom's father, and this is the bride's father. And the earl is a former wealthy person, but he's come on bad times. The girl's father is a merchant, and he is newly wealthy and wants to make sure his daughter marries into the right sort of family. So point out a few of the details that Hogarth put in here, basically kind of like making fun of the people that are in this situation. So first of all, we have the earl and his bandaged foot. This means that he has gout, which is basically you get that from eating food that's too fancy and having too much of a illustrious lifestyle. If you drink too much and you eat too much fat, you get gout. And so here you're showing that this guy is, yeah, fat, lazy, and spoiled. So the earl is dressed up ridiculously, and there are little crowns everywhere. Now, I'm not sure if you can actually see this on your thing. There are little crowns on the footstool. There are crowns on the end of his crutches. There are crowns all over on the picture frames. So, and I'm not sure if you can see, there's even a crown right here on the side of the dog. So making fun of the fact that he knows that he is, wants to show off that he is part of this aristocracy sort of thing. All right, so he is pointing to himself here, and he's pointing to his family tree. And here you have William the Conqueror and this family tree. But if you look carefully, the branch that he's pointing to isn't actually connected to the main branch. And so it's showing that in his family, his ancestors or one of his fathers had been disowned by the family. So he's not really in the family, even though he's sort of being proud about it. Let's see, some other things. Okay, so right now he is having financial pressure because you can see in the background, he is wanting to build this beautiful new house. However, he has sort of the name, but not the money. And so he is marrying his son off to this rich merchant's daughter because then he will get the dowry. And then let's see other things here. Yeah, so here you have another little thing you guys would actually be able to appreciate. Notice the architectural style. These are actually Corinthian pillars. These are Ionic pillars. And there are 2 Corinthian pillars here, 3 Ionic pillars instead of the other way around. And this mixture of the styles is kind of to show that he just sort of has bad taste. Oh, let's see, looking down my list here of all the different notes I have on this. Let's see, there's an entrance in here to the stable, which wouldn't be large enough. And the architect here is holding the plan, and he is basically waiting for the money to come from this guy. So on the table is all this money, which he's going to get from marrying off his daughter, or marrying off his son to the daughter. So that's the dowry. Let's see. So the Viscount, the future groom, is paying absolutely no attention to the girl. He is sort of like this foppish, overly wealthy, doing his snuff, no interest in the girl at all. The girl is not looking at all interested, and she is attended by this lawyer. So the lawyer's name is Silvertongue, and he will come into the picture later on. Okay, I have like pages and pages here. All of these paintings here are about things of danger, death, and martyrdom. So each of these paintings has sort of a way of Hogarth saying, yep, this is all going to come to tears. So we'll move on and tell a little bit of the story. Okay, this is the next day, or this is shortly after the marriage. And so this is the morning, and here we have the bride, and she is sort of waking up a little late. So it's 1:20 on the clock. So that it could either be 1:20 in the afternoon, which is most likely, or 1:20 in the morning. So 1:20 in the afternoon, they're just getting up. And you have here the husband has returned from his night out, and he's looking bored. The dog here, dogs are symbols of faithfulness. He has actually found a lady's nightcap in the husband's coat pocket. So she is sort of signaling to someone through her mirror. There's probably her lover is in one of these frames off to the side. And if we look around here, these all have various meanings of unfaithfulness and bad taste. And the paintings along here, notice this one. This is where you would have these nude paintings that often in art history classes, they'll talk about. They would, if you have polite company, you would pull a curtain over the top of it. And so this is also a symbol of the fact that things are not going well between these two. So here is the engraving copy of it. All right, the inspection. So this is the, we'll go to this. This is a better one. So here we have the husband, and he is going back to a doctor because he's saying, this medicine you gave me for syphilis is not working. And here he has his new mistress, or this is a prostitute, we're not sure. And she is also, so you can see it a little better on this painting, perhaps. She is also showing the first signs of coming down with syphilis. It causes these black scabs. And this lady could be her mother, it could be his assistant, it could be the person who's in charge of the brothel where he got this lady from. And so he's handing this back. He's got sort of this smile on his face, but he's holding his cane up somewhat threateningly. And then all around here, you have symbols of the fact that this doctor really isn't much of a doctor. And this guy is going around infecting and getting infected with all of these terrible diseases. But let's look at what the lady is doing in the meanwhile. So this is at her morning rising. And so here she is, and accompanied by all of these people. And here's the lawyer who happens to be, with her at her morning rising. And you have the symbolism in all of these different people. This fellow's a little strange, sitting there sipping his tea in hair curlers. You have her entertained, so she's living a wealthy, spending her money. You got the guy curling her hair. Well, she is flirting with her lover. And these symbols down here, especially this one, is a god who is, or not a god, a person who is cursed in Greek mythology to turning into a deer. And he is a symbol of unfaithfulness as well. All right. In the baño, which is like a hotel that you could rent for illicit dalliances, as it were. And the husband has come in and discovered his wife with her lover. And they have fought a duel. Perhaps the husband was visiting his mistress in the same place. So they have fought the duel, and he has now been killed by the, he has now been killed by the lawyer who is escaping through the window. And the rest of the neighbors are coming in just in time to see him die as she says, "Oh, please," and begs for forgiveness as he expires. And then now she has overdosed on poison and she is dying herself. And here's her baby, who you can tell is also inflicted with syphilis, has leg braces, has a sores, the baby won't last long. And her father is just simply, as she dies, father is like, well, I can't let that wedding ring go to waste. And so he takes the wedding ring off of her hand, and you again have this turned over chair. You'll notice several of these have overturned furniture. So here, this is a symbol of the fact that there is discord. So here you have one, that there's disagreements going on. And the father now is so poor that all he can afford to eat is half a pig's head, but this starving dog is about to make off with it in the meanwhile. And so basically, the moral of the story is that these wealthy people and all of the things that they're doing are to try to get ahead in life. If they had only lived honestly and faithfully, they would have prospered, like his other series would show. So, and here is a shorter one that he put out. This is only two, sort of a compare and contrast kind of thing. And excuse me. So to give you a little background, at this point, England was, this is the time when, for example, Charles Dickens wrote a lot of his things. Christmas Carol, Oliver Twist. This is a really rough time to be in England. And you had this group that was, you had a large proportion of the population, especially in the cities, was extremely poor. And gin was a cheap imported liquor. And it came from France, and it had these connotations of being foreign. It was really cheap. It got people drunk really fast. And so Hogarth is showing here the results of this sort of drinking gin. And by extension, he's talking about this foreign influence. On this side, you have beer, good native British drink. It's healthy. It doesn't make you, emaciated and an addict. No, if you drink beer, you'll be good, happy, and healthy. And so this is a good British thing here. And the parallel on the two different sides, for example, you have here this mother who is so drunk that she's not noticing as her baby falls to its death. Here you have a pub that serves gin. If you look along around in here, you have a fellow who's hung himself in this corner. You have people out collecting the dead. Here they're putting them in coffins. So all through here are hidden little signs that life is not going well. You have this guy who might even well be dead here. On this side, however, people are happy and they're healthy. And the churches, the buildings are being fixed up. Here the buildings are falling apart. The only person who's not doing well in this one is the pawn shop. And this is a sign for a pawn shop. Over here, the pawn shop is the only guy who's doing well. So here a carpenter is selling his only tools of his trade. So once he sells them to buy gin, he's not going to be able to make any money anymore. Over here, the pawn owner is the one who's poorly off and everybody else is prospering. And it's interesting today that we can tell where he set this picture because of this church in the background, and we know where the street is. Today, this is a fairly upscale neighborhood in West End where all the musical theaters are. But this is a good example of Hogarth, and yeah, again, I have pages right here. You can't see them. If we had time, we would go into this in depth. So come out for my other art class when we offer it, and we'll talk about all the hidden meanings in these paintings. So here's a closer view of Gin Lane. You can see the riots, this mom feeding her baby gin. And in Beer Street, everything is up and coming. You've got goods being loaded into the attics because they're prospering. All right, Antoine Watteau has nothing to do with the Star Wars character. So Embarcation for Cythera. And we're now approaching the end of the Baroque itself. And in this one, we have this group of people who are in this sort of idyllic landscape. And Cythera is supposedly the place where the goddess Venus was born, or Aphrodite, depending on which flavor you are. And so here's a little statue of her, and you'll notice the Baroqueness, sort of the busyness. And the idea was that if you visited her birthplace, you would find true love. And we call this the embarkation for Cythera, but actually it looks like the people are already pretty much paired up. So perhaps they are leaving from Cythera after having found a successful, their visit was successful. So some people call this the pilgrimage to Cythera. And he actually painted two of these. So here's the one version, and here's the other version. So some of the characters are the same. Okay, these two people here are the same as these two people. So these two people here, okay, so that is the same, but you'll notice he's added some details. Okay, he's added the statue now is moving and looking, so she's not just standing there stiff. This is a little more Baroque. There's more activity. You have the boat. And in particular, over here, you have just a couple of these little critters floating about. Here, you have much more. And we call these thingies putti. So they are not cupids. There are putti, singular is puto. And this was a characteristic of the late Baroque. And what we're moving into now is called the Rococo. And this is where you basically take the Baroque and just go way over the top. And so as you can see, this is now filled with little putti just crawling over everything when stealing the picnic basket. All these little cute bare-bottomed babies flying about. I've always kind of wondered in Baroque paintings, none of these little flying babies have diapers. And I've heard with pigeons, you just have to wonder what that'd be like. Yes?
Why is it black and white?
So it shouldn't be.
Oh.
So, yep. You can look at the other, if yours is only showing black and white, you can look at the PowerPoint when I put it up online to get the colors. Okay, so here we've gone. It's even more Baroque, and this is what we call Rococo. So style of the late Baroque in which embellishments are taken to the extreme. And Rococo can actually be really fascinating, makes for good tourist things, for example. And it comes from a French word, rocaille, which originally dealt with these little plaster decorations that you would find in places. So this is one from that area, that era. This is one from Hornbach that you can buy today. If you want to put this up in your corner, you can do that. Actually, this one's made of styrofoam. These are made of plaster, and these are called rocaille. And eventually, they developed to this point, where this is a Rococo painting, or it's more than a painting. They began to merge where you had the plasterwork, which is here, and you had the sculpture, which is here, and the sculpture and the painting and the plaster begin to blend into each other. So you have this little puto here, sort of lifting a corner of the painting and started trying to crawl under the painting. And so they began to integrate the fresco, the sculpture, the plaster, and so all of it begins to work together. And you'd have these little cute things with like the putti trying to crawl under the painting. And one of the more famous places in the Rococo style is the Kaisersaal in the Episcopal Palace, the Bishop's Palace in Würzburg, called the Residence. And this is very recognizably Rococo. Lots of frills, lots of pastels. So take anything that's a Baroque and do it even more. So here's another one. This is from the same place, a hall of mirrors. You have Rococo, it extends beyond just painting. You can have Rococo style tables, the furniture, the walls, the ceiling plastering. And you also had paintings. So you had Fragonard or Watteau, and now we get Fragonard. And this is one of his more famous. This is also in the museum with all the swords. And this is called the Swing in the Rococo style. This is actually painted as a commission. He wanted to give this as a present to his mistress. And so he said, Watteau, would you please make a painting of my mistress on a swing? And then when he got it, he thought, oh, this is way too scandalous. And so he refused to take it. But we'll look at some of the features here that make it Rococo. First of all, you have again, diagonals. You actually have two crossing diagonals. You have the light area here, and you have the swing area here. So instead of being just simple horizontals and verticals, you actually have two conflicting, contrasting diagonals, which gives this idea of a swing. And in the back, you have this person who is pulling on the swing on these ropes, and the lady who is on it, swinging out, kicking off one of her shoes. And what makes it scandalous is that this fellow, who was possibly hiding in the bushes, or maybe has been knocked over, is basically looking right up her skirt. And the little Puto, who is now a statue, has got his fingers to his lips going, shh, don't tell anyone about this. And the fellow who ordered this was so scandalized that he said, nope, this, I won't have it. But from a Rococo point of view, you can see how the vegetation is now doing it as full as possible. The branches don't go straight. You got to have the branches twisting and turning and doing whatever. And you have your three putti here as statues. If there's putti, there's a really good chance that it's going to be Rococo. All right. How many of you have visited one of King Ludwig's castles? Have any of you visited them? They're not that far away from here, about 3 hours or so. And this is the one that he actually lived in. It's called Linderhof. And this is way over the top Rococo. But notice the year. So he is like over 100 years out of fashion, but he loved that Rococo. He loved the like way too much. And so he went and sort of, you could call this neo-Rococo. He also spent a lot of money, and there's some cool little intrigues about murder and suicide and the state taking over his things to turn them into tourist attractions after they killed him, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of conspiracy theories. Come and talk to me later. But these are all pictures from Linderhof. And it just, yeah, hopefully you can look at that and say, that is so incredibly Rococo. And the other place that we find a lot of Rococo is in churches here in southern Germany, especially as you go a little bit further east into southern Bavaria, although there are a few in Swabia and the other part of Baden-Württemberg. And this, for example, is a pulpit. So when Emma's dad gets up to preach, or when my dad would get up to preach, the pulpit did not look like that. It was just sort of this piece of wood. Okay, but no, that would be so not Rococo. So you can see you've just got to decorate things way over the top for the pulpit of this church. Here is the ceiling. This is in a place called the Wieskirche, and it is amazing. It's just set out on the sort of in the middle of a field at the top of a little hill, no city around it. It was set up as a pilgrimage church, and so especially during this Rococo period, the people would travel there, and then of course the church would make money off these pilgrims. But you can notice the way that they've decorated, and haven't talked too much about the perspective, the trompe l'oeil, but here you have the tricking of the eye into the fact that it's hard to tell which of these are real. is this a real plaster balcony or is this a painting? So it fades from real into painting as you go up. And so it continues. This is obviously real. This is obviously painting. And at some point between them, it fades from one to the other. And we looked a little bit at the orders of columns. And this is a good example of just simply taking this whole idea of Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, and throwing it out the window and saying, we are going to just make this Rococo. If I can add a little bit of something, a tuft of this or a fluff of that, if we can add some dangly bits and some floaty bits, that's good. All right. And the other big architectural piece, the Autobahn Abbey. And honestly, I just basically picked one. There are at least a dozen that you could look at that are all in the same general area that are equally spectacular and equally over the top. So this gives you an idea of what a Rococo church looks like. And with that, we now have the art world. People are doing stuff like this, and along comes the next generation who says, you know what? I think maybe this is a little bit too much. But before we talk about that, you guys have a Baroque test to take.
Wait, we have a test?